different idea personally.
Yeah, done.
Is this, can you hear this? Oh, there you go. I think I got it now. All right, so our next speaker this evening is going to be Jesse Walker, the co-owner and head coach of Rough Hands. Jesse Walker has been coaching mixed martial arts and combat sports for 15 years. His main goal is to make self-defense accessible for everybody. So give it up for Jesse Walker.
Test, test, test. Welcome to my amazing talk. All right, so great. Have you got what you need on the sound? Sure, sure. Okay, perfect, perfect. So thanks for coming out tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about fighting and particularly learning how to fight. It's a skill that I think everybody should have, and it's really hard to get the teaching necessary to a lot of the people that need it the most. So I want to start the evening with a thought experiment. And I want you to be very aware of your reaction that you have at the suggestion that I'm getting ready to make. And the suggestion is this. On Monday, when you have some free time after work or whatever, I want you to come to the school, and we're going to start teaching you how to fight. Just think about that. All right, so how many of you said yes? You ready? So a few of you. Good. You all are easy. I'll see you on Monday. I'm not really so worried about you tonight. How many of you said no? So quite a few of you. So this is the problem. How am I supposed to run an inclusive organization when most of you exclude yourselves before we even have a chance to meet? So let's end it there. Did you get enough? Yeah. Perfect. Okay. It sounds great. Yeah.
We were really liking it. I
think we forgot it was rehearsal. I was like,
so what's going to happen? What are they going to say?
All right, so then we have a clap, 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 and then
Abby's going to take a shot.
Clicker goes to you.
You're up, boss. Lucas, we're going to go from the top now. So just go to the first slide. The very first. Yeah, on both. The very first slide on both. On both. Yep. 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 Yes. That would be first. That's very first.
TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
All right, am I good to go? Sweet. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our 4th annual TEDx event. And we just have a couple housekeeping rules before we get started. So first of all, emergency exits are at the back of your house to your left. You'll see the exit signs back there. And we urge that you do not leave during the TED Talk. Just stay in your seats. Please turn off all cell phones. Make sure we don't want anything going off. And please no flash photography, video tweets, memes, TikToks, any of that. And we have a photographer here, so you'll get all the photos that you'd like. And just to let you know, we will have a 15 intermission after our first 3 speakers. And now I'm more than glad to introduce our MC for the show, Mr. Jacob Schumann.
Thank you, Abby. I'm excited to be here. It's been a really long time, and when we first thought of this event, it seemed like a dream, and now we've been doing it for years, and it's been a lot of fun. Our theme for tonight, which I think we've all been kind of asking ourselves for the past 2 years, is now what? Every day for the past 2 years seemed to bring the question to mind. Rarely do we get the response that simultaneously considers the many concerns humanity faces. Tonight, at TEDx BellarmineU, we will do just that, asking, now what? We have 6 speakers for you tonight, sharing ideas that are worth spreading. A reception after the event will also feature bourbon tasting sponsored by Heaven Hill and coffee tasting by Center Goss. Our first speaker tonight is fantastic, as they all are, Dr. James Wilkerson. James Wilkerson is the Director of Equity and Diversity, and he's the Deputy Title IX Coordinator at Indiana Southeast. He is the author of a best-selling book, The Title IX Guy, and was named Best Local Writer 2021 by Leo Weekly. Give it up for James Wilkerson.
I'm so pumped about this. All right, thank you.
In 2006, I sat in my first postgraduate apartment with MySpace pulled up. Many laborious hours went into picking the perfect Jay-Z song to greet the thousands of visitors that I was sure my well-curated page would attract. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Tarana Burke took to her MySpace page, albeit for a much different reason. You see, Burke wanted to unify and empower the victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment. In 2006, Me Too was born. Flash forward a few years later, actress Alyssa Milano would take to her Twitter, and she would ask all of her followers who had been victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment to respond to her tweet using the hashtag #MeToo. The movement that Burke started over a decade prior had made it to the modern day and had gone viral. Suddenly, people were taking to all corners of social media to share their experiences with sexual assault and sexual harassment, many for the very first time. At long last, we were having a much-needed conversation about sexual misconduct on a global scale. But Me Too was more than just talk. It was action as well. Serial abusers like Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein and R. Kelly finally faced justice for decades of inflicted trauma. Me Too would even make it to some of the highest offices in our country. Who can forget the iconic image of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford swearing in before the Senate to talk about her experiences with then Supreme Court hopeful Brett Kavanaugh? From 2017 to 2019, Me Too was the brightest shining star in the social justice sky. Until one day, it wasn't. Now, don't get me wrong, Me Too is still around. You can go to the Me Too website right now and see a lot of great work that is still being done as a part of the movement. But in terms of being that viral sensation that it once was, Me Too cooled off. But this cooling off period, it's not unique to Me Too. Most social justice movements will go through it. A movement will gain popularity and will bask in the spotlight of viralness until we inevitably move on. Now, some people will blame social media slacktivism as the reason for us moving on. Social media slacktivism that allows us to latch on to any social or political ideal we want, share a few posts about it, maybe argue with some jerks in the comment section before we move on to the next movement du jour. Others will blame the 24-hour news cycle. A news cycle that serves us up stories at such a rapid pace that it can be difficult to digest what is on our plate before the next course is being rushed from the kitchen. With a combination of the 24-hour news cycle and social media slacktivism, it comes as no surprise that we have been able to move on from #MeToo to #BlackLivesMatter to #MaskUp to #MurderHornets, all within the span of 3 short years. But let's get back to Me Too. The stories have been shared. Some convictions have been handed down. So the question is, now what? Well, now this. In the 2006 book, We Believe You, activist Brenda Tracy had a very powerful quote. In the book, Tracy said this. She said, "Women cannot stop rape. If we could, we would have already done so by now." There are some good men out there, but not enough are speaking up, and not enough are doing their part. So, if the question is, now what? The answer, fellas, is now us. Now we must reach down and grab the Me Too torch and use it to light our way towards sustained cultural change. Now I know what you're thinking. I can hear you thinking it to yourself right now. Well, sustained cultural change, that sounds fine and good, Wilkerson, but how do we go about doing that? How do we get there? Well, this is a TEDx talk, right? Yeah, this is a TEDx talk, so you know I'm coming with solutions. As a matter of fact, I'm coming with 3 calls to action for every man here tonight in the live studio audience and for those watching from home. And ladies, these calls to action, they work for you as well. Don't want you to be left out. We want to make everyone included. These calls to action are something for you too. But when 90% of the perpetrators of sexual misconduct are in fact men, well, guys, this is one of those times we need to take our seat at the front of the class. Call to action number 1. We must engage in meaningful self-reflection. We must take an inventory of our beliefs and our actions to see whether or not we are part of the solution or part of the problem. Now, I get it. This part can be difficult. It can be embarrassing to think back on some of the behaviors that we participated in undergrad. It can be embarrassing to think back on some of the jokes we laughed at in high school. Simply put, self-reflection can be painful. But in the words of Hall of Fame radio host Charlemagne the God, if you're not hurting, you're not healing. Call to action number 2. We must practice compassionate listening. What is compassionate listening? Compassionate listening is when your female coworker comes to you upset because someone has made a sexually insensitive remark, that you don't just write her off as being a snowflake, but you take the time to listen and understand why that comment caused such pain. Compassionate listening is when a student comes to you and tells you about the misdoings of a fraternity on campus, that you don't just write that off as boys will be boys, but you take the time to understand why that misdoing has caused damage to your campus, and you respond to that group accordingly. Compassionate listening is when your teammate comes to you and tells you about a time that he was the victim of sexual misconduct, that you don't write him off as a sissy or some other emasculating term, but that you listen to him with the very same ear that you would listen to your mother with. Call to action number 3, and possibly the most important of them all. We must hold each other accountable. Now, there's this misconception that accountability is a difficult process, but I'm here tonight to tell you that that is not true. Did you know that it takes about 30 seconds to lean over to the person you're sitting next to in the car and say, "Hey dude, stop being a creep," in response to him hanging out the window and catcalling a woman walking down the street? Did you know that it takes about 90 seconds to type, "Hey, we shouldn't joke about stuff like that, that's not funny," in response to an email that a colleague has sent you making a joke about rape? Did you know that it takes about 140 seconds to physically place yourself in between a party guest that can no longer give consent and a friend that is on the verge of taking advantage of said party guest? Accountability is actions that take mere seconds to complete, but that can prevent years of trauma. Self-reflection, compassionate listening, accountability. Guys, this is the triforce by which we must live our lives. And if we do, we will be well on our way towards that sustained cultural change. I'll leave you with this. When Me Too was at its height, there were some men out there that got pretty upset. These men, they got so offended that people would have the audacity to step forward and to tell their stories. These guys, they stood up and they puffed their chest out and they took a step forward and beat on their chest a little bit. And they were like, "Now hang on 1 second with all of this Me Too man-bashing malarkey. It's not fair. It's not fair for you to talk bad about men like this because look at me. I don't sexually assault people. And my buddy Dave over here, well, Dave doesn't sexually harass people either. And our buddy Jimmy doesn't do any of this stuff. So you just need to go right on ahead and pump the brakes with all of this feminist agenda male bashing, because after all, come here Dave, come here Jimmy. Hashtag not all men. And if this is the philosophy in which you choose to live your life by, then to you I say, congratulations on doing the absolute bare minimum that it takes to be considered a decent human being. Here's the thing though, the bare minimum is no longer enough. It's no longer enough to look in the mirror and say, well, hey, I don't do all that stuff, so sexual misconduct is not my problem. No, it is your problem. It's your problem, it's your problem, your problem, it's my problem. Sexual misconduct is a community problem. And as such, it requires a community solution. It requires us to look at ourselves and understand where we stand. It requires us to listen to other people. And it requires us to check our friends, our family, our coworker, our fraternity brothers, our teammates, and all of those around us when they get out of line. Fellas, we must work tirelessly until hashtag not all men turns into hashtag not any man. That's the goal, that's the destination, and that is now what? Thank you.
Thank you, James. Our next speaker is Samantha Perkins. Samantha Perkins is an author, speaker, and mental health advocate, and a proud supporter for living alcohol-free. Give it up, everybody, for Samantha Perkins.
Hey, everybody. About 8 years ago, I quit my job working in mental health to become a stay-at-home mom to my then 2-year-old son and my newborn daughter. It was a huge transition. I wasn't sure exactly how to manage this newfound stress and anxiety, and so I turned to other moms to see how they were managing. There seemed to be a common underlying theme: drinking. I would walk into a store and see hand-painted wine glasses that said, "Mommy's sippy cup." There were t-shirts in the women's department that read, "They wine, I wine." And moms shared memes with other moms all over social media that said, "It's not drinking alone if your kids are at home." I thought this was funny, and I like to drink, so I hopped right on board, pouring myself a nice, relaxing elixir to soothe the sound of that damn singing Elmo. At first it worked. I did feel relaxed, but I noticed after just a couple drinks, I would wake up in the middle of the night, tossing and turning and feeling, well, stressed. I wasn't alone. The American Psychological Association in 2020 said that 50% of Americans report that they feel stress in their behavior and their mood. The CDC says the more stressed we are, the more we drink, and since the pandemic, drinking has increased by 41%. Alcohol seems to be our go-to when times are tough. It's what we turn to when we're feeling stressed. The messages about this are everywhere. Drink and be happy, drink and be calm, drink to connect. My question is, if alcohol marketing were right, and alcohol were really the solution to stress, then why aren't we a culture of all like zen, relaxed, easygoing, chilled out people? Why are we instead reporting so much stress and so much drinking? Sorry, I keep going the other way. You see, alcohol is a tricky thing. When you first start drinking, your brain produces a lot of feel-good chemicals. Your arms and legs feel tingly, you feel all warm and cozy on the inside, and you do at first feel relaxed. But just after those first few sips, your body realizes, whoa, that was too much of a good thing at once. And so it starts working to try to balance and stabilize. Your heart rate increases, cortisol and adrenaline are released. These are stress hormones. And your liver, once it realizes that you've put ethanol into your system, works into overdrive to try to rid your body of the toxins. The National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism says that just drinking a little bit disrupts every natural system in your body. This leads to mood instability, increased anxiety and depression, sleep problems, and more. The American Cancer Society says no amount of drinking is safe because it's linked to several different types of cancer. It increases heart disease, destroys the lining of your stomach, and depresses your immune system. The CDC also says it's responsible for 95,000 deaths per year. It's the third leading cause of preventable death. But back when I was drinking for my stress and anxiety as a new mother, I didn't know any of this. I thought that my stress and anxiety were because I didn't go on enough runs, or that I needed to do more self-help or meditate more, and I started eating a lot of kale. My story goes a little bit like this. I have a question about the video here. What?
Hey, Rod.
So when it'll just come up when I get to that slide.
Do you need it to show the moment that the slide accesses? Because I can make that happen. Or do you want the black screen to happen and then you just...
That'd be fine.
So the way how it is right now is fine?
Yeah, that'd be fine. So just click the play button like I would on any of the others. Okay.
I arrived at adulthood, and to my surprise, it wasn't as great as I thought it would be. I did all the things I was supposed to do. I graduated from college, I got married, I had kids, I drank responsibly. But when I woke up every morning, I was anxious, tired, and things felt meh. I wanted to feel better, so I dieted, drank smoothies, took Epsom salt baths, and I drank. I cut carbs, went keto, tried vegan, cleansed, and I drank. I ran, lifted weights, read self-help books, and I drank. I didn't feel better. Then I was tired and discouraged, so I searched, read, Googled, and I discovered it was the drinking. Drinking gave me hangovers, it gave me anxiety, it gave me a headache, it made my life dull. I stopped drinking. I became alive AF.
My mic, okay. So AF stands for alcohol-free, in case you were wondering. You see, I didn't know that you could drink kale smoothies, go for runs, and have a problem with alcohol. I thought that people who had problems with alcohol had something detrimental happen to them, that they reached some sort of Hollywood story rock bottom, and that they needed to go to rehab or recovery. And while that may be true for many, many people, it's also true that 9 out of 10 people who have problems with alcohol aren't necessarily clinically addicted. And so when I found this out, my first thought was, I've got to tell people. And so that's what I've been doing. I've spent the last several years building up a platform to talk about how alcohol affects our body aside from addiction, how it affects our mental health, how it affects our parenting, how it affects our mood and behavior in general. For example, people just completed Dry January. Dry January is a challenge where people go 30 days without drinking. The University of Sussex did a study in 2019 and found that just after 30 days, people reported that they had more energy, they slept better, they lost weight, they lowered their blood pressure and cholesterol. I can attest that after over 4 years of being alcohol-free, my physical health has definitely improved. But more importantly, my mental health has improved. That stress and anxiety that I talked about, pretty much gone. When I stopped drinking to cope, I was able to open up a whole world of self-care. The CDC recommends that we manage stress through healthy diet and getting plenty of sleep, which we all know, but also to find authentic connection, to create and make time for hobbies and play. I started a blog. I was able to create and use writing as a tool to cope. That blog led me to writing a book, which has led me to connecting authentically with so many other people who discovered that alcohol was affecting their life. They weren't addicted, they didn't have a rock bottom, but they wanted things to be better for them. And so I made it my passion to talk about this and share about this. And now I'm connected to women all over the city, all over the country, who want to share about this as well. So, scientifically, I'm telling you that alcohol does not reduce stress. It does not help us cope. On a physical scale, it wreaks havoc to our bodies and it makes us sick. On a community level, it's responsible for a lot of death and destruction. I'm not suggesting that we all stop drinking, but I am suggesting that when we encounter people who are experiencing stress and anxiety, maybe we could offer them something a little better. Maybe instead of those hand-painted wine glasses, we could say, paint tumblers that say, when you feel stressed, you go for a walk or drink water. Or they whine, I ask for breaks, or ask for help. Then could we finally cultivate the culture needed to create the calm for justice, equity, and peace? I think so. Thank you.
So normally we'd be going to our one more speaker, but we're just going to go ahead and cut to intermission. But we're going to do our little intermission thing. Yeah. So we're going to go to intermission now. Lucas, if you could be on those slides. You need to be on the slides for intermission. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just gonna walk out. I was just giving that. Yep. Okay. All right, everybody. Now we're gonna take a brief intermission, and I'm out here to talk about it, but I actually don't know anything about it. So, however, I do know that we do have a bourbon tasting, which I'm very interested in. Abby?
Help you out. Right, you're correct in that we do have a bourbon tasting.
I'm excited about that.
Oh, of course.
Yep.
We've got a little bit more going on. So Jacob is right in that we do have a 15-minute intermission. And once we close the doors after intermission, we will not open them up again.
We will not open them.
We will not open them. You're trapped. But once the doors close, we will not open them until after the event is over. But before that, there are some lovely refreshments out in the lobby, and we would love to thank Sonnergoss and Heaven Hill for providing those for us. All right. Thank you all so much, and we will see you in a few. Welcome back. So I don't know about you all, but I'm ready to get on with the show. Except I feel like we're missing something kind of important. I don't know, the MC of our show, Jacob?
Hey. Sorry, I was at the bourbon tasting. Heaven help. And I tried some Cinergoss coffee too, so.
Oh, okay,
I'm
so
ready to
you
go.
kind of balance it out there.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
good.
yeah,
So we're
yeah.
good. So
I'm good to
how
go.
about you introduce the next speaker?
Yes, thank you. All right, everybody. Our next speaker is Lee Look. Lee is a firefighter and has a PhD. Lee Look is a company officer with St. Matthew's Fire Department. He works with an apartment director at Cedar Lake Lodge, a facility for people with intellectual disabilities. He spent the pandemic running incident management. Give it up for Lee Look.
Ounce and a half of gin, half an ounce of Saint Germain elderflower liqueur, juice of a quarter lime, muddled with basil, half an ounce of simple syrup, shaken, garnished with a lime and a basil leaf. Hi. My name is Lee. A quick note, I will be referring to note cards throughout this talk, and the primary reason is I don't want to be thinking about the next word or the next idea. I want to be present with you. Also, we've not done this in over 2 years, and I don't want to screw it up. And lastly, if after 8 minutes you're still thinking about my note cards, I have not done my job. Like all of you, I lived the pandemic in a very specific yet personal way, and likely not so different than you. I'm a firefighter, a first responder. As a captain on a truck company, we respond to COVID-positive patients at homes and skilled nursing facilities constantly, providing medical care until an ambulance arrives. I'm a department director in a residential facility for people with intellectual disabilities, working with the most vulnerable people in our society. These folks don't necessarily understand the specifics of what's going on around them, but they absolutely get that things are different and that their families aren't visiting and their staff are leaving and those caring for them are trying to figure it out as they go. And I'm a mental health counselor providing support and therapy for people doing the same work I'm doing, while they're also trying and support and maintain a relationship, keep their emotional heads above water. This is the trifecta for pandemic involvement. I also spent a significant amount of time running incident management teams, which most organizations implement when there's a tornado or a flood, and they typically last a few days, maybe a couple of weeks. Well, now we're implementing this for over 2 years. These teams ensure that the fire department and the facility where I work were addressing staffing shortages when there was no staff, virus mitigation, PPE burn rates, contact tracing, mental health support. For example, we have 3 people in our dietary department at my facility. They manage 3 meals and 3 snacks per day, 7 days a week. If 1, 2, or 3 of them turn up COVID positive or unable to work all at the same time, which happened 2 weeks ago, what happens? Our people have to eat at specific times every day by regulation. Someone has to make that plan, and that's me. All of these are things that we never thought we'd be managing. What became clear to me pretty quickly is that people, you, me, all of us, we need consistent, ongoing communication, information, and reinforcement in times of trauma. Whether or not I have the correct answers, the right policies, or the most encouraging messages, it's the consistency, being present. This is vital. So, for 368 days in a row, I emailed a daily reinforcement to a group of several hundred people. This was a short email and encouragement designed to build a community of people who took care of each other, and more than that, a group of people who accept care from one another. This was much more challenging. I would send the email out around 6 in the morning, and by 9, the responses would come in letting us know that we are okay. And yet, my life through this, in spite of this, was relatively easy. I had tasks, I had things to do, I had projects to work on to try and get us through the pandemic as effectively as possible. We are a people of action. We see a problem, we try and fix it. But this is a pandemic that in order to fix it, we have to do nothing. We have to stay home, we have to stay still, we have to avoid others. This was brutal. There are a few people in my life that because they worked hard at staying in, allowed me to work hard at the things I needed to do. I could not put myself in the situations I was in without knowing that the people I love are doing what they could do to not become one of the people that my fire truck was going to help. April 25th, 2020. The balance in our lives has been thrown off. All of us have been rocks. All of us have teetered. All of us have stumbled. This is normal. And we've all gotten back up. No matter how many times we fall, we get back up and we lend a hand to those around us. It's why we're going to get through this and be better on the other side. Yesterday, we helped someone. Tomorrow, someone will help us. Trust it. We are doing this. April 29th, 2020. Being thankful. It has its challenges right now. Resentment comes more naturally at times, so let's vent. What are things to resent? We miss talking about something other than this. We miss people. We miss being comfortable in public. We miss being spontaneous. We miss working. We miss restaurants. But most of all, we miss a peaceful night's sleep. A night when we don't go to bed thinking about this and wake up thinking about this. We will rest again. Something I realized, and research reinforced, is that our emotional state is directly reflected by what we consume, that is, eat and drink. Conversely, what we eat and drink can give an insight into what we are feeling. Drinking is quick. Drinking gets us through the next hour. It's short term. It was a counterpunch to the haymaker punch that was the beginning of the pandemic. Any one of us that's ever been hit before or accidentally hit your head on something can recall the feelings of being dazed, of being out of sorts, confused. But isn't that kind of what happened? I mean, the pandemic punched us, and we had to respond. And our first response was to go numb. May 15th, 2020. It's a weekend, which may not feel much different than any other day, and yet we are running out of creative ways to entertain ourselves. This is normal. It's extremely taxing doing what we're doing, staying centered, taking care of each other, loving each other through this, taking care of ourselves, staying away from people, staying home. But sometimes we take a little time away and we get to eat chips and salsa while someone else watches the pandemic. Gin and tonic, vodka, soda, bourbon, rocks, tequila, straight, Baileys and coffee, all of it as our first coping mechanism. On TV shows, Jimmy Smits and Dennis Franz, Don Johnson, Philip Michael Thomas, Will Smith, Martin Lawrence, and all the cops and firefighters and EMS people that I've worked with all my life, they don't come home after working at the precinct in an intense homicide and knock back a turkey sandwich. Tryptophan doesn't really have the same numbing effect. June 10th, 2020. Take a breath. It seems like things are moving fast. Everything will get done. We can remember what is important: community, connections, homemade sloppy joes, while also dealing with the ordinary: plumbing, car repair, a Kool-Aid shortage. Thankful for you all. We've got this. And like all fight or flight stimuli, the effectiveness and fulfillment of this coping mechanism will eventually become unsustainable and fade. We become accustomed to a new normal, and when we do, a different coping mechanism takes over. We stop worrying about making it through the next hour. Life becomes about making it through the next day, and this involved, for my partner and me, cooking, mostly tacos. Carne asada tacos with jalapeno, cilantro, queso fresco, homemade pico. Also those cool taco holders that you get at restaurants that make the tacos stand up on your plate. Definitely money well spent. June 13th, 2020. Let's honor this community today. To do that, I invite anyone that receives these emails to send me any thoughts you'd like to share with this community. I'll begin putting them into these daily updates. A few general thoughts on this. Let's try to limit references to politics, if possible. It can rhyme. It doesn't have to rhyme. You can talk about tacos. This community will benefit. Be well. I look forward to your words. There were some great recipes shared. For example, try making Greek tacos, and instead of using that taco seasoning, use the Greek seasoning you get in the spice aisle, and instead of using salsa, make tzatziki, which is really just yogurt and cucumber and garlic. It's amazing. Homemade corn tortillas with old school ground beef made with those 79-cent packets of seasoning from the store, cheddar, white onion, taco sauce, a salad of carrot, cucumber, cilantro, tomato, and green onion, no lettuce, gin and tonic. July 17th, 2020. We can be okay. We can be grateful. We can be kind. We can also be angry, anxious, frustrated, apathetic, and still be okay. And roasted garlic on the grill, spread on crusty bread, is almost as good as tacos. Until tomorrow. And then, we started to emerge, to grow, to start to look a little farther ahead, which I learned 2 days ago is not the same as further. Further is a cause, farther is distance. So I'm saying the word farther intentionally. I would also say that the human spirit was slightly ahead of Pfizer and Moderna and human ingenuity. That is, we humans adapt, and we will learn to thrive in this new normal. And because of this, we were able to move to the next phase. We began to look to the future, and this was reflected as well in what we wrote and in what we cooked. And for us, it was homemade turkey stock. February 22nd, 2021. Here we go. This community will continue to be effective, vigilant, kind, of grace. This community will help those in need, support those who are down, carry those who are tired. We will share our experience, our recommended podcasts, our tacos. That will be enough. One more. Turkey carcass, peppercorn, cilantro, onion, celery, carrot, salt, pepper. If you've never done this, I promise I know it looks not at all appetizing. But after a little time, you get this. It will change your food and your mood, and it's a gift that keeps giving. March 11th, 2021. We can see the end goal. We move decidedly toward it. Parts of the path are still covered. We can exhale, but we remain vigilant. But we remain alert, but we remain focused. We have come too far. We have got this. Make no mistake, homemade stock is perfect. Yet it typically doesn't show its perfection until the future. That's the beauty and the evidence of growth. It gets put in the fridge or the freezer and will come out later and make tetrazzini or soup or risotto someday down the road. Risotto with homemade turkey stock, peas, Parmesan cheese, fresh basil, and probably a gin and tonic. And just like our resilience, we will make something better down the road. March 26th, 2021. We have every reason to be proud. We have been effective, vigilant, kind, of grace. We have cared for ourselves, each other, our community. We have done it every day. Every day. One more. So we made it through, right? Life is mostly normal. Hell, we hardly even talk about it anymore. So I guess you could say that we pretty much won the pandemic. And I have to say, I think I was the primary reason that we all got through this. I mean, you all are part of a very select group to be able to witness this process, to witness me and my forward thinking, my spirit. I mean, at this point, what could go wrong? Well, shit. February 18th, 2021. We may be anxious, angry, frustrated, apathetic. We will be effective, kind, vigilant, of grace. And we are okay. Let me take my stuff with me. That's all right. That's all right. Oh, do I need to say something? Like, do I need to say thank you at the end or something? Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. That was really good. Sorry, we were all literally just like listening.
Oh, thank you.
All right, what's next?
Yeah, yeah.
seconds? All right.
5 seconds. 25 seconds. Right here, 30 seconds. After you 25. Right here, 30. 30. Here's 35. 40. 40. 40.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, our next speaker is Julian Thomas. Julian Thomas is a multimodal artist, writer, speaker, and teacher, and we are so excited to have him. Please give it up for Julian Thomas.
How we doing, guys? I'm Julian, and I'm here to talk to you guys about perspective, comic books, and making the world a better place. So first, I want to start with asking you all some questions. Just keep your thoughts to yourself. You don't have to share them or anything like that, all right? So first, is this a protest or a riot? Is this an insurrection or a stand for freedom? Is this a terrorist or a man fearing for his life? Now, while some of us may have differing answers to these questions, there are two common threads. First, all of our answers are a matter of perspective. All right, perspective is supposed to be right there. I might have said it wrong. I think perspective needs to go after Malcolm. But all of our answers are a matter of perspective. Second, regardless your answer, the physical events themselves don't change, only our understanding of them. That said, the significance in the slides I've shown you lies not only in the events or the actions of the people themselves, but also how we view those events and actions. I'd argue that perspective actually carries more weight because it's perspective that determines how we move forward in response to these things. Death is death. You're no longer alive. But perspective is what determines whether a funeral is a time for mourning or a time for celebration. In 2020, Jacob Blake was shot by a police officer, an objective truth. But perspective is what led some people to launch community-based social programs to lessen police presence and led others to carry rifles across state lines. Kyle Rittenhouse killed 2 people, but perspective is what determined whether he was jailed for murder or exalted as a hero. Perspective is what says the Boston Tea Party was a patriotic response to an oppressive government, yet the events of 1992 Los Angeles were a riot. What's more, perspective not only affects how we examine history and current events, but also how we look at society at large and where we as a people and individuals fit within it. What we perceive to be our reality is based on how we view our material conditions. Perspective, though, is also fluid. It tends to change and morph the more we learn. It evolves as we're exposed to more pieces of the puzzle. When we look at perspective this way, we start to see how vital it is in the quest to create a better world. We see that challenging perspectives isn't just a pastime for Facebook contrarians, but a revolutionary act. So, if the way we approach the world is based on the way we view it, and the way we view the world is shaped by the things we've learned and been exposed to, we must ask the question, what exactly are we learning? Now, I'm not here to talk about the shortcomings of American primary school education, but in regard to perspective, it's worth noting the educational climate that we live in. We live in an era where seeking to understand racism is routinely banned. Politicians attempt to criminalize accurate depictions of history for fear of making white people uncomfortable. Do we think black children are comfortable when they're told that their history is one of suffering and subjugation? Or is comfortability perceived differently in this regard? The inevitable one class period per month, Black History Month, was dedicated to Malcolm X, tell us how he was supposedly a Muslim radical who supported anti-white violence, a villain, but being attacked by dogs in the street alongside Dr. King by those very same white people is perfectly okay. The perspective given us would never have us think that Malcolm said things like, I have eaten from the same plate, slept on the same bed or rug, while praying to the same God with fellow Muslims whose skin was the whitest of white, whose eyes were the bluest of blue, and whose hair was the blondest of blonde. The things I've seen and experienced on this pilgrimage have led me to rearrange much of my thought pattern and toss aside many of my previous conclusions. Malcolm's not only pointing out the fluidity of perspective here, but also how challenges to his perspective via exposure to new things caused his to change. I never got to learn that, though. So, as a black child in America searching for identity, as all children do, where do we turn to truly learn about ourselves and the possibilities of what we can be? If not school, then where? A supportive family base is a luxury that not all of us have. The reality is, a lot of times, we turn to media and entertainment. Entertainment can shape our view of the world much the same way education does. The difference is, with school, we know the goal is to learn. We're aware perspectives are being given to us, so it makes it easier to reject them if need be. We kind of look at school like an isolated chamber separate from the real world. We've all heard students who've gotten a bad grade in pre-cal say things like, I'm never going to use that in real life anyway. That implies to them, school isn't real life. Entertainment, though, we see as a reflection of reality. And in this arena, the fact that perspectives are being pushed is much more subtle. Propagandas and ideas get to dance in front of our face in broad daylight behind the guise of fiction. But decades of sitcoms tell us that the standard family unit is a white, hetero, upper middle class, nuclear family. If that doesn't describe you, well, you must be a deviation from the norm. When I was 15, it seemed the only time I would see black people associated with wealth was in music videos. And while there are plenty of financially successful rappers, not every affluent black person is a musician. But how would one know that? We never got to see it. Okay, cool. I just gotta pay attention to the thing. I'll refresh it tonight. We never got to see it. For many of us, entertainment isn't just art imitating life. It's also escapism, a chance for us to leave behind our worldly woes and let our imagination soar, especially with science fiction and fantasy, a favorite genre of the comic book medium. Yeah. Not a problem at all. Sorry about this, guys. Okay, sorry. Anyway, so for many of us, entertainment isn't just art imitating life. It's also escapism, a chance for us to leave behind our worldly woes and let our imagination soar, especially with science fiction and fantasy, a favorite genre of the comic book medium. The caveat is, for black kids, even in the places we escape to, we don't get to see people that look like us. We're not even encouraged to imagine ourselves in different lights. And trust, kids notice this disconnect all on their own. When I was young, my first love was an anime called Dragon Ball Z. I was obsessed. I watched it faithfully, pretended to be the characters, made up my own characters. And even though that show set me on my current career path, in the back of my mind, I always knew something was off. There were no people that looked like me. Well, there were these blatantly racist caricatures. But that doesn't look like me, and my friends and I at our lunch table made a conscious effort to ignore that. Instead, we decided another character was actually the black one. Let's take a look at that character. Piccolo, a green chaotic neutral from another planet. Not black at all, not even a human, but still on some level, we, a group of 9-year-olds, were so hungry to see ourselves represented that we latched on to anything we could relate to even a little bit. Unfortunately, all we were given was a green alien. Imagine if the depictions we had didn't make us feel marginalized. Would my friends have continued to draw? I pored over anything science fiction, and I loved all of it. But the whole time in the back of my mind, I had to wonder, Dad, ain't no black folks in the future? But fret not. The same hammer that can be used to destroy can be used to build. We can use entertainment to provide representation for those that need it, while also painting a picture of what the world can be. I should note, though, that representation isn't the end-all be-all. Without action, representation is just tokenism. It doesn't matter if you can see new possibilities if you don't have access to the resources to make those possibilities a reality. That said, I also think that in order to do something, you must first believe you can do it. But it's very difficult to believe you can do something when you're constantly told or shown that you can't. And that's exactly what happens when the hero never looks like you, or when the only time you see yourself in your favorite show, you're being caricaturized. But it doesn't have to be that way. So, what now? Well, now we use entertainment to our own benefit. And when I say we, I don't necessarily mean black people. I mean the sum total of the human race that wants to see an end to oppression and injustice. And that brings me to my main point: comics and anime. I know it may not seem that way based on what I've said thus far, but I promise I'm here to talk to you guys about comic books. So, a lot of the ideas I've been discussing have started to manifest in shows like Abbott Elementary, Insecure, Atlanta, work from N.K. Jemisin. But when it comes to challenging perspective, comics are a uniquely impactful tool for a few reasons. First, comics have an undeniable connection to the youth. And they have this really great negative stigma that goes along with it that only makes the kids like them more. Comics have this kind of punk rock effect in that they represent a counterculture lifestyle that provides community for its fans. You don't just like anime. It becomes part of your identity. You decorate your room with the figurines, you wear the t-shirts, you get the tattoos. But what if these tattoos represented something more than the shows they come from? Next, comics get kids to read, and we all need to read more. I'm not even going to spend time supporting that. Literacy is something that we need to encourage, and comics do that, though not conventionally. See, the Western perspective of comics is that they hold no real literary value. And while that may be bad for the image of Hajime Isayama, Brian K. Vaughan, or Art Spiegelman, it's also a double-edged sword. The other edge is comics become more appealing to kids who don't want to read. I'm talking about the kids who may never pick up a copy of Stokely Speaks or Wretched of the Earth, but have read hundreds of chapters of Naruto, One Piece, and Saga. To them, thanks to comics, they're readers and they don't even realize it. Last year, I was called upon by AMPT and JCPS to teach a comic book course for some local high schools. So many parents reached out to me to tell me how happy they were that their kids were reading. They had tried and tried different methods, but it was comics that had done the trick. And despite the Western perspective, comics do hold literary value. Attack on Titan is a beautifully written examination of different responses to fascism. Mouse is a Pulitzer Prize-winning interview with a Holocaust survivor. Thanks to comics, kids got to be exposed to these ideas without feeling like they're being forced to read. To them, they're not reading at all. They're escaping. Why aren't we giving them better places to escape to? Why aren't we using this to deliver the ideas that we know they're not getting in school? Lastly, because comics depend so heavily on both visual and linguistic modes of communication, they can deliver ideas in a way no other medium can. Nothing plants the seeds of an idea better than the written word. Words can slither into the crevices of your mind and lie dormant, waiting for the perfect moment to bloom. But reading is one thing, seeing is another. When we only read about tragedy and injustice, our minds tend to turn the atrocities into abstractions. The tragedy exists only so long as your eyes are on the page. See, reading can help with understanding in this regard, but seeing adds a tangible layer that helps us to feel. When I read about the murder of George Floyd, I was upset. My mind triggered its defense mechanisms and turned the information into just that, information. George Floyd didn't have a face. His death was an idea. It was easy to compartmentalize. But when I saw the video, when I saw Derek Chauvin's knee digging into Floyd's neck as he screamed out, I was repulsed. I was outraged. I was motivated. This was no longer a series of words on a Twitter timeline or a statistic. This was a human being that looked like me, having his life unjustly ripped from him in the middle of the street while people filmed it. The pain I felt from witnessing such tragedy moved me in a way that only reading about it couldn't. And that's the thing about comics. You have to read them and look at them. Comics can give the words to provide understanding and plant the seeds while concurrently giving the imagery to make those seeds bloom. What other medium can make that claim? It's for these exact reasons that I make comics now. I pivoted from am I going over time? Okay. I pivoted from a 12-year career in music to comic writing because I felt compelled to deliver a message, and comics were the best vessel. For me, Black art isn't just about telling an entertaining story. I saw an opportunity to be an example for all those kids doodling in their notebooks or daydreaming of fantastical worlds. I want to show you have a talent, and this talent can be a viable career path, even without outside help. I wanted to highlight the intersection between Black culture and geek culture, not because I'm trying to create Black geeks, but to provide affirmation for the plenty that already exist. You are not alone. You are valid. When you never get to see yourself, it's easy to get the perspective that you're an outsider. Blackheart's goal is to provide the perspective that not only are we welcome here, we belong here. Spider-Man wearing a pair of Jordans or T'Challa leading a war charge is only the tip of the iceberg. We need more, because most importantly, my goal is to give Black kids the chance to see themselves in a perspective different than the one most often provided. The industry we love so much at times doesn't seem to love us back. That leaves it up to us to love ourselves. So we must be willing, as a people, to be open to new perspectives. We must be willing to challenge other perspectives. We have to do the work necessary to provide positivity for our most impressionable, the youth. For me, a long time, Black representation meant Black trauma, slave stories. And while slavery is a part of American history and its ramifications need to be understood, when all you see is slavery and trauma, it stops being history and starts becoming identity. Black folks aren't just victims of slavery. Black people are scientists, lawyers, authors, doctors, poets, parents, and teachers. Black folks are human beings. And that's not a cry for bigots to see the humanity in others. I don't care about that. That's encouragement for us to see the beauty within ourselves, to be unafraid to look at ourselves in a different light. Something like skiing shouldn't be racialized, but it's common perspective that tells us certain activities are for black folks and certain activities are for white folks. This is what needs to be challenged. For all of us, the goal should be to create a better world for all of us. And with comics, we have a tool that allows us to reach the youth, get them to read, and provide them with new ideas. We have something that can push people to that point of realization where they can say, hey, maybe there's a different way to look at this. When we see comics in this light, to me, it stopped being something that I should use and became something, stopped being something that I can use and started being something that I should use. And I think that goes for anyone who has the ability. But hey, that's just a matter of perspective. Thank you.
All right, everyone. I guess that brings us to the end of our show. Thank you so much for coming. We just have a few final words before we let you go. And by the way, it says here update in all caps, so I don't know if this is update information, but we'll go with it.
The TEDx core team would like to thank the comm department, I think the DAT program, art department. We can update this. There's a lot of thank yous to give. Yeah, we got to update that. We're going to thank some people that did some stuff, and thank you all tonight. And yeah, and
go drink. Go drink. Thank you.
Or don't.
Or don't.
Yeah, or don't. We're just going to have to add that to the... We can edit it. Yeah. Yeah, is any of this accurate? No. Okay.